transitioning from residency into clinical practice. Hello, real clinicians. This is Nasseh with a special presentation that's directed specifically to the dental students interested in endo or endodontic residents that are ready to graduate and hoping to make a transition from a dental school setting into clinical practice. Now, this could mean that they're going to work for themselves in a private practice or someone else's office, be an associate, join us in a group, or become a partner and work in a dental corporation, or even go to a whole different direction and join academia and engage in research and teaching. Basically, this is really a talk about leaving school and entering the real world. No pun intended. So the opinions that I will share here probably they don't apply to those of you who have long graduated and have established careers and are working in your own offices. So if you're in that category, you can probably tune out at this point and go watch some of our other videos. You know, what I say here is really an open discussion, so make sure that you comment below this video and share your opinions and your concerns in the specific area. Now, I was recently invited to give a talk at the MassTer Study Club, which is a collaboration between the endodontic residency programs locally here at Boston, which include the Harvard program, the Tufts, and the BU, which is Boston University Endo program. So I was asked to give a short presentation and be part of a panel discussion on the topic of transitioning from endodontic residency into clinical practice. It was a lively discussion, and I really had the pleasure of sharing the stage with two really great endodontists, Drs. Peter Morgan and Jan Rosen, that are endo professors at both Tufts and BU, respectively. And I represented the Harvard program. So we each spoke for about 30 minutes to the residents and then, shared our own personal experiences in terms of transitioning from residency into private practice. And then we had a panel discussion and an open forum, and it was very productive. Now, I know that we here at Real Endo have a lot of endodontic residents around the world who watch our videos and they make a lot of constructive and kind comments and feedback below the video. So what I wanted to do is to share the presentation that I gave to our local endo residents with the rest of you guys and gals out there, in case this message may be of some help to you guys in guiding you lead productive and successful careers in the years ahead. So let's get to it. Okay, so when I was asked to make this presentation, I decided to go back 20 years when I had just graduated and look back and see how I felt at that time during my graduation, what I learned that I didn't learn during my residency programs that helped me or didn't help me once I left the school. So this is going to be a fairly informal presentation. My goal here is not to really tell you guys what to do, but to tell you what I did and how my thinking was and how it was shaped at the time of my graduation. So this might as well be titled Some Random Observations, Pearls, Useful and Maybe Not So Useful Information from Someone Who's Already Done It. So fair warning, this is going to come across as a rant and I may ramble on to all kinds of different areas, just feel free to tune me out if that happens. I promise I won't be offended. Our story begins on my graduation day on a beautiful day in June at Harvard Yard. The weather was great, and as is often the case in June in Cambridge. The birds were singing and the sun was shining. My family was there to celebrate, and everything was really aligned to be a great and happy day. However, deep inside, I really wasn't feeling happy that day. In fact, I kind of had the blues. The reason was that even though I was very young and I had, accomplished my goal of accomplishing and finishing my postdoc degree at the age of 25, I felt like my entire life until then had built up to this specific moment. I had traveled extensively early on in my life and had settled to study dentistry very early. I was brought up in a dental family with my dad being an oral surgeon, and I didn't rebel against his advice, his good advice, and follow the family tradition. But all my plans had culminated and ended at this single point of graduation, and I really hadn't planned anything beyond this point. And now I stood at this intersection with lots of options ahead without really having figured out what to do next. Should I go into academia? Should I go into private practice? Should I work for myself? Should I work for someone else? What should I do? So lesson one, Plan early on and plan well and update your plans regularly. I had no personal attachment, so I decided to do what most people do when facing alternatives. I chose to do a reversible option, which is to work for someone else, buy some time until I figure out what I wanted to do and what works for me. So I decided to work for a large dental group. I worked in several different offices serving their endodontic needs. I worked pretty hard, 6 days a week, long hours, and I aimed to primarily pay back my student loans. While working, I still made time to teach part-time at my school, which was the Harvard Dental School, immediately right after graduation. I figured that many teachers in the past had dedicated their time to teach me what I had learned during my residency, and it really was my duty now to give back to those who were going to be after me. So I strongly really encourage all of you guys to give back to the profession by teaching at your local dental school or endo program part-time, even though it's really more productive to spend that time in clinical practice doing cases. I think it really gives back to the profession. It's a wonderful feeling, and it helps other people. And I think it's definitely something to do at the very least, on a part-time and just even one day or a half a day a week. So my decision to teach part-time instead of going into full-time academia, which was something I wanted to do, was because I wanted to practice a little bit and experience some of the kind of the real world get some clinical experience under my belt. And I really needed to have a higher income that was possible through full-time academia at that time. And you see, this is really where your philosophy in life and your worldview will make a difference in the decisions that you will make. I left school with lots of student loans, like many of you guys out there. And for me, that had always been an unacceptable concept. So my goal was to pay it off right away, and that's really what I needed a job for, and so that could make it possible. Lesson number 2, live below your means. I got a really great piece of advice from one of my professors at Harvard right upon graduation. As I was leaving school, I asked one of my senior faculty members what advice he would give me that would fit in a single sentence. Of course, being wise, he leaned over and then whispered into my ear, "Live below your means." So this simple recommendation and my listening to it versus laughing it off was very helpful. I worked very hard while continuing to maintain a student lifestyle for an additional 3 years after graduation. This was really on purpose, and it really helped me pay back all my student loans, which was a substantial sum of a few $100,000. And since the interest rate back there in the 90s was around 8%, and that was not really tax deductible, this really made the most sense, and it was a priority for me. If you get a chance, read the book Millionaire Next Door, The Millionaire Next Door, that is, and it's kind of very helpful. You see, living as a student for such a long time to achieve your doctorate and then your postdoctoral degrees, your first instinct after graduation is to go out and treat yourself to a great status symbol for an amazing experience. Unfortunately, the money and interest that you spend on these items on top of paying student debt at a minimum payment will have a multiplier effect that will postpone your financial freedom and wealth accumulation. Many people don't really understand this basic rule that borrowing money to buy something that loses its value over time is really the worst kind of spending. But borrowing to buy something that increases in value is really an investment. So while cars, clothing, fancy dining, and travel are all spending, buying real estate, stocks, bonds, or building a small business, or even furthering your education even, can potentially be good investments. But the only sure investment is paying back debt, since although stock, bonds, and all those other things can potentially lose their value during economic downturns, your debt remains the same. Lesson 3, minimize spending and maximize investments. If you know where you want to live, it would really make sense to invest into buying a house as early as possible, and then take an equity line on that house to pay back your student loans. This makes sense because it makes your non-tax deductible student loans tax deductible by taking the equity out of the house, which is a tax deductible expense, and pay your student loans with it. Lesson 4, buy a house early, but ideally you buy a house when you know that you will basically stay in that area for at least 5 years and that you're able to rent it if not going, if you're going to be leaving earlier. Now, regarding insurance coverage, you clearly need health and malpractice insurance. So be sure that you get a high limit to protect yourself. I also recommend that you get a disability income and also term life insurance. And this is especially necessary if you have a family to support and other obligations that are way beyond yourself. Remember that some student loans may be transferred to your estate in case of your unplanned demise. And of course, nobody ever plans their demise. So, be on the safe side and make sure you have all the bases covered. Also, you want to lock in your lower premiums when you're still young and healthy. And for these kinds of insurances and different insurance options, you should probably contact AAE because they have a lot of different resources that are available to you in the specific area of insurance. Now, while your insurance premiums will add a lot of overhead to your life, think of it as money that you pay and will hope that you'll never have to collect or use. To get back to my story, after 3 years of working and teaching part-time, I had decided that I will stay in Boston. So now Boston is a especially saturated area for endodontists. We have 3 dental schools with 3 endo programs within 2 square miles. And that's really the only place in the US where this is happening. So my decision to start a practice right in the heart of the Boston area was not only cavalier, you could probably say it was also foolish. So I first began to rent space in an established office, and then after, about a year or so, I decided to open up my own office from scratch. And yes, like too many people, I too had heard the voices.
If you build it, he will come.
Yes, this scene from Field of Dreams represents really every entrepreneur's delusions and their inner voices. If you build it, they will come. Well, the reality is obviously much more complicated than this. Opening from scratch in a highly competitive area with an established market has a lot of different challenges. In fact, let me just tell you that if your plan is to just build it, they will not come. So that is something to keep in mind. Here's when I realized that I had gathered lots of clinical knowledge about how to do surgical and non-surgical procedures during my 11 or so years of pre-doctoral and then postdoctoral education and all that stuff. But I had really not learned something that's equally as important to my success as a practitioner, which is how to run a practice like a business. Lesson 5, don't minor in philosophy. You see, in his book, The Entrepreneur Myth, it's also called the E-Myth, Michael Gerber tells us that to run a successful business as an entrepreneur, you really need to be 3 different people all at the same time. You need to be an entrepreneur, a manager, and a technician. Unfortunately, each of these 3 characteristics and these characters are often very different, and at times they even conflict in terms of personalities with each other. So it's like wearing 3 different hats at once with 3 different people that don't like each other. The entrepreneur is the visionary. He or she is somebody who will set the vision of the practice, of the business plan, and it motivates people to follow this vision and to implement it. The technician, on the other hand, is the person who's doing the frontline work and trying to implement the entrepreneur's visions. Basically, in the endodontic office, the technician is the endodontist, is the guy who's practicing and doing the actual root canal. And last but not least, the manager. The manager uses the skill set required to compel and to motivate all the personnel that are working at the office and all the human capital that includes the endodontist or the technician, if you will, to come together in order to implement the entrepreneur's vision. So as you can see here, these 3 people have specific functions. If one person is to do all 3 persons' job, you really have to be good and you really have to know each person's function. We go to school for all of this time to only learn how to be a technician. So how can we learn to do the other 2? I mean, our training is only 2/3 short of this whole formula of these 3 people. No wonder so many of the practices that we see are so poorly run, and many dentists have the feeling that because they're good technically, that they will necessarily succeed in their enterprise clinically or as a practice. And that's just not true. That's wrong. Being technically good is only one of the 3 requirements. You really need to gain the other 2 on your own. So I went back to school and took some night classes in the business area for a couple of years, and that really helped me put together a solid business plan and proceeded to implement it. So the idea was simple. I created a business model that is based on the first business principle of customer satisfaction. And in this case, patient satisfaction, since, they're really our customers. So I put together a system where patients rated me, my front office, and my assistant as they walked right out of the door. And this way, I could immediately find out what was going on and what we had done and hadn't done that was up to their point of satisfaction so that we could improve it right away. You see, I didn't really focus on me producing beautiful radiographs and nice looking cases. My goal was to produce happy patients. And I didn't pat myself on the back every time I negotiated around a big curve or found a sixth root or something like that, but only when I saw a patient leave the office really happy, satisfied, and with their mind blown as to how quick, painless, and easy a root canal could be. I mean, patients see us for many reasons, but negotiating curves is really not their main priority. They want successful, efficient results rendered painlessly in a warm, pleasant, and respectful atmosphere. So they know it when they see it, and they are the judge of that experience, not you. So, my practice grew quickly as a result of implementing these concepts. The lesson to learn here is that building an office in a competitive market is really not impossible. It's actually possible, but it can only happen if you have a successful business plan and are willing to work much harder than you would in a less competitive market. Here, the decision is basically yours to make. Do you want to live where you want to live, which is probably likely a desirable place where other people, other endodontists or other dentists also want to live, and then you'd have to face, greater competition, or would you rather go somewhere with less competition? Either way, you are not guaranteed success any more than you are guaranteed to fail. Your success is really a function of proper implementation of a worthwhile vision planned correctly through a good business plan, and also your failure is a function of your inability to implement that vision and that business plan because of poor planning. So it's just a matter of whether you're willing to invest the effort into that it takes in order to make this whole enterprise a success in your given market. So that's another key point. Lesson number 6, prioritize and plan. Regarding the question of should you work for yourself or should you work for a group or whatever, I think the most important thing is to really have a plan. If you know that your goal is to open up at some point, don't spend way too much time working for other people. Get a couple of years of active experience where you can try to learn the business aspects of running a practice. Then pick a location that works for you and then go for it, Just remember that opening up from scratch or buying an existing practice is not really the only way to go. Depending on your goals, it may work better for you to be an associate in a small group or work in a multi-specialty practice or work even for a large DSO. Now, I'm personally not a big fan of DSOs. Unfortunately, they are the way that a lot of the places are moving towards. The problem with the DSOs is that, not only you're not your own boss in any way, but also you're pressured a little too much in terms of production and time that you spend with the patients. So you're really limited in terms of producing what I was talking about as the patient satisfaction model. I mean, the DSO model is the same thing as the managed care, which is the reason why most of us now are complaining about our physicians and our doctor's visits, because we just don't have enough time to spend with them. And the same kind of a thing could apply to DSOs. Although, if there is a situation in which you get into a DSO in which you have some time or ability to negotiate whatever works best for you in terms of the way you want to see patients, that would be ideal. But that requires a little bit of confidence on your part. Ultimately, making the right decisions for your future has more to do with knowing yourself and what your priorities are and what kind of a person you are, if you will, than it has to do with what kinds of options are available to you. So make sure you plan in advance, visualize your goals, and then set out to achieve them. It's fairly simple, but it's easier said than done. the future of endo. Now, in my opinion, endo will remain a strong specialty in the foreseeable future, short for the caries vaccine that may come out of the blue or some unpredictable disruptive technology. Endodontic skills will remain in demand as long as people are consuming sugar and are way too lazy to floss. The skills and the need will stay strong, especially in the emerging markets globally. Endodontists really should take an active role in educating both patients and as well as other colleagues about the value of saving their own teeth. We need to make endo approachable and also improve our diagnostic and treatment planning capabilities. Also, what we need to do is we need to make sure that the endodontist is an integral part of treatment planning team and all the decision making that goes into removing a tooth prior to implant placement. So this basically means that the endodontist should see a tooth before it's extracted and is replaced with an implant. At the same time, today's technology is allowing most well-trained endodontists to produce great quality cases. And even now, the average general dentist is managing many basic cases successfully. So while the total number of cases are not changing yet, endodontists should become more proficient in managing more difficult cases successfully, which is really the definition of being a specialist. I mean, you don't want to just do easy cases. You're going to see more difficult cases. This is where your surgical ability as an endodontist will come to be a major factor in the future. Frankly, implants are really no longer a major threat to endo because their real success rate is now becoming a little bit clearer to the profession. And we know that those success rates are really below endodontic therapy for the most part, because your endodontic surgical skills will help you achieve even higher success rates and save more teeth. It's really critical that you do and get familiar with doing surgery and be comfortable with it. So there's no longer really an excuse for not liking surgery, and endodontist is really a surgeon. So pick up the scalpel and get the required training to manage soft and hard tissues adequately through a surgical method. Now, you need to demand more from your programs and your program directors, because the old axiom of non-surgical revisions followed by more revision and more revision and more revision until the cows come home is dead. You really need to know surgery and have to be really great at it. End of the story, that's it. So please don't snooze in your anatomy classes and pay good attention to be able to get the required training and the required practice in your residency programs to be capable of managing all the maxillary and mandibular molars, as well as obviously all the rest of the teeth. The new graduate should focus on something beyond clinical technique, and that is, in my opinion, patient satisfaction. Understand that you're not working on a mannequin, and focus on providing efficient and effective care in a warm and caring environment to your patients. Work on your communication skills with your patients alongside perfecting your clinical techniques. We often make the mistake of thinking that we really want to treat patients the way we want to be treated. The old golden rule, treat others like the way you want to be treated. And we're often, proud to consider that as our goal. But I'm here to tell you that you really shouldn't treat patients the way you want to be treated. You should treat patients the way they want to be treated. This is because we all have different priorities and different value systems. So spend just a few minutes to get to know your patients before understanding what they really want and need. Otherwise, you'll be making a value judgment about what they want and make decisions about their treatments based on your priorities rather than theirs. And this actually is where that DSO concept comes to be a problem, because when you don't have enough time to spend with a patient, then you'll end up rushing to judgment a little bit sooner based on your own given assumptions. And, part of the reason that I, in this channel and through all the educational things that I have had, that I have done and I've shared with you guys, part of the reason why I emphasize an efficiency of the treatment, of the efficiency of care in terms of the instrumentation and obturation, all this splice, ceramic revolution, hydraulic condensation, all this stuff that we've developed here for you guys, is so that you can cut down the time on the instrumentation and obturation that used to take all this time, so that you can have actually more time to spend with the patient, because that's really a critical part. You don't want to just think of this efficiency in endodontics as a means of increasing your production, but rather in terms of being able to cut down the amount of time it takes to do a procedure. So that you can spend more time with the patient, connecting and building that bond of a doctor-patient relationship. So again, to sum it up, how's the future of endo? In my opinion, the future is bright as the technology improves and as we all begin to understand how to make cases work. Patients will basically benefit from keeping their own biological teeth versus having metal screws in their heads. For the foreseeable future, endo will continue to be a great procedure that will benefit the patients and as well as those who provide this procedure. And the key, however, is for all of us to focus on becoming a healer and a great communicator rather than a technician scraping pulp tissue from dentin with the main objective of producing good-looking x-rays. You don't want to be a tooth carpenter, all right? You guys want to be physicians of the mouth, which is basically what we advocate here at the Harvard program. This is what I call a patient-based practice, which is beyond the lip service that we all give and providing the goods actually to the patients. As far as practical advice, go to where you'll find demand and then spend the time and effort perfecting your craft. Educate your colleagues, build reliable teams where everyone works together towards better endo-restorative continuum. And yes, you can make it in even a super saturated area. Just keep in mind that the demand for your services is not distributed evenly geographically. And if you want to work in a saturated area, then you got to be ready to give it 110% of an effort and have the tenacity compared to working in an area where you are in great demand. So as long as you're ready for that challenge, you can do it, I bet you. Now, I think we all agree that residency is simultaneous and exciting and a very scary time in your lives. You're now the specialists and people rely on your expert advice and guidance for their health. The pressure only mounts from there. Your goal is to always be right and never let your patients suffer, and as a result of your carelessness or negligence, if you will. You're therefore never done learning, as the field of endo is constantly moving forward, and you need to stay abreast of these changes that are taking place. Hopefully, you're going to gather great scientific foundations during your program that you can then use to evaluate future innovations and determine, their clinical merits. In the modern world, you'll be facing constant battle, differentiating between the truth and mere marketing. So, in a way, graduates is really not the end of your learning experience, but rather the beginning of a journey of learning and experience. A specialist is somebody who knows more and more about less and less until he knows everything about nothing. So, in a sense, we all achieve wisdom when we finally realize how little we all know. So, let me tell you something. Stay humble and exercise humility at all times. Clinical practice, as a specialist, has a tendency to make you a little bit arrogant at times. So resist this urge if you can. Constantly learn, discover, and question everything along your path. Anyway, share this video and don't forget to continue this conversation in the comments below and share your thoughts with me and the feedback you have for us. For Real World Endo, I'm Ali Nasseh, and I wish you guys all a wonderful and exciting career and a happy personal life.